I really am excited. You've got a beautiful record, New Stars record.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that, man.
Yeah,
That's nice to
gorgeous
hear.
record. Yeah. I say it's beautiful, and I sort of wonder, as with most things in our world of music, if it's deceptively beautiful.
Well, hopefully, I wouldn't want it to just be beautiful. That would seem awfully prosaic. I mean, yeah, that's sort of our thing. I'm not sure songs can be beautiful without them being a bit of a deception, because the nature of the pop song is that it ends very quickly, and there's a kind of cruelty in that. The hook keeps you coming back to try and regain that moment of hearing it, but you never are satisfied. And I think that's definitely a big part of trying to write a good pop song, is to leave the audience or the listener feeling that they've been tricked in some way.
I mean, I thought it was all so easy. I thought maybe with this one I can just escape with this one, but the more I listened to it,
it's pretty dark. I would say it's the darkest Stars record in many ways.
Yeah.
The Five Ghosts is pretty unremittingly black, but this one is. This one goes into the forensic details of things, I think, that are tough for people, and so a big part of making that record huge part was Peter Cadis and his decision to force us to be a blue band and to go into our blue, sad place. We came to him with a bunch of songs about, the orange-haired lunatic who runs your country and, all that stuff, the state of the world, yada, yada. And he wasn't really interested in doing that record with us. He's a Stars fan because I think he feels like we write good love songs, and we write songs about what it means to love people platonically or otherwise, and how hard it is or how hard it can be. And that was everything for him was about capturing our sadness. Every voicing, every arrangement decision, every lyrical decision, he pushed us towards the darkness. And that was hard for us because we're people pleasers. But I think what resulted was that we have a record that sounds very much like us and very much like something that we weren't trying too hard to do. And I'm very glad for that.
I look at that title, even just the newest single release with the song "Alone," which is sort of says everything within the title there. And I thought, first off, I was such a huge fan of that album, The Five Ghosts. It's one of my favorite records of the decade, I believe. Which,
thanks, brother. Me too. That's nice to hear.
When you say that, it kind of makes sense. Maybe why I love this record the way I do, and. But going back on that song there, it's I started thinking right, because no matter where we are in the world, loneliness never changes. No matter what era we're in, whether you were writing songs about lovelorn and being alone in the early 2000s or now, that part of humanity really doesn't change. And as we get into what is happening right now with the dude in the office, that loneliness I don't know, because in one sense, that loneliness starts to feel a lot heavier. But at the same sense, I feel like suddenly I'm banded together with folks now more than I have been in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think he's sort of united the world in some strange way. It feels very much like he's divided us, but I think he's actually divided a small subsection of us off from the rest of us who are feeling lonely. I mean, I think that, the title is as close as I can come to describing what I feel about this new era of screens and of desensitization and separation from one another. And I think it's very hard to write about that, about technology's creeping influence on us and how it's making us feel isolated. It's very hard to write about that without sounding trite or without sort of missing the boat. By the time you get the record out, it's already even more appalling than you possibly could have captured on your album. I mean, I think that's interestingly sort of what Arcade Fire ran up against with their record, which I think is quite an extraordinary record in many ways, and a band I love and admire their bravery so much. But that in trying to sort of face the zeitgeist, they just sort of made people feel crappy, and that was clearly not what they intended. And I don't think, in my opinion, that record's a success. But people's sort of violent reaction to it I think, came partly out of the fact that it's so hard to peg exactly what this modern loneliness feels like, and nobody really wants to be told about it. It's like, it's like this secret we're all trying to keep underneath ourselves, because we know these things, these screens, the internet, we know it's not going well. We know it isn't. And we all are addicted to it, and we all kind of love it. But is it helping us? Don't think so.
And it's kind of interesting too, because Stars, as a band, as Stars, you guys started in the year 2000, right? So
yeah,
you've grown up. I mean, you're what I would call one of the internet era bands. You came up with blogs, championing you guys in the mid 2000s, and of course have seen all the variations from Napster to what we have now with Spotify. But for you guys, I mean, that's 17, almost 18 years ago. Like, now this is a band grown up, having been through all of this and seen it, and the reflection, and having to deal with it. And maybe it's never been easy to be a band, but it seems like now you're in the biggest fight of your life to try to become a band as a business as well.
No question about it. I mean, it's 100 times harder. When we got into the business, 2000, as you say, that was the year that the most CDs ever were sold in the history of music. And it has been literally our career. I try not to see it as anything more than a coincidence, has sort of tracked the decline of the music industry. I'll tell you a funny story. When we first started out, the first guy who signed us, he called us up and was like, okay, I'm going to sign you, but I need you to change the name of your band. And I said, this was 1998. I said, why? He said, well, there's a thing called Google, and people go on it. Have you heard of the internet? I was like, kind of. He's like, well, people go on the internet and they look stuff up on Google, and your name is too generic. People will just get geometry, astronomy sites, and you got to change it to something more original. To which I replied, dude, no one is going to go and look for bands on a thing called Google. That is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. You find out about bands in the Village Voice, man. Don't you know anything? So that was I had a really deep understanding of technology's influence on the coming era. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. And we're finding that even since we put a record out 3 years ago, the business has changed fundamentally again, that streaming now is, 60% of the business, that Spotify is this giant corporation that you have to deal with who control 40% of the market, and that a lot of people, that all that stuff is controlled through algorithms. I don't think people really get this. So if you're listening to Set Yourself on Fire 10 times a week on your home stereo on the CD you bought 10 years ago, that's not registering, which means that stars in the streaming world have no importance. So a big challenge for us is trying to get our longtime fans to understand that in order to make us exist in the world of currency now, they've got to go and press that like button on their streaming service, because that is actually what people are looking at in terms of who they're judging has an influence. And that's a struggle for us, because we're a band from a time when people still did buy records, or if they didn't buy records, they stole it off the internet. They downloaded it, but it was theirs. And this whole idea that music now is just a tap you turn on and out it comes, it's very hard to know how you monetize that for the people who are providing that water. We'll see. But if I was a young band right now, I'd throw my hands up in despair, I think. It's pretty tough.
Ultimately, what you want to do is just be able to create your art. It's just to be able to write great songs and have people hear them. And there's always that pesky business thing. But of course, when I think about it, in the 90s and early 90s, pre-internet, it was all about posting your flyer on as many, telephone poles as possible around the town,
right.
or having your street team. Yeah. Call up your street team in Albuquerque and saying, hey, we're going to come on the 20th. Can you guys do some marketing for us?
That's right. Yeah. And that wasn't easy either. But I think that there's, I think whether it's rock and roll, whether it's literature, the theater, my wife is in the theater and all my family are in the theater, and it is hard to get people to pull themselves away from these glowing machines. People aren't going out to restaurants the way they used to.
Right.
And I'm hoping that it's cyclical. I'm hoping that we sort of burn ourselves out on the endless narcissism of the internet and find ourselves out on the street again trying to communicate with each other. But at the moment, it does feel like the benefits of the internet, of which there are many, are being outweighed by the real challenges to just basic human interaction and what we've known, what we've called society or what we've called community in the past. how do you build a real community if the sort of online community has so much reach and so much power? How do you get involved with people in your town or your local band or your local poet? It's a big question, and I'm thrilled that the internet allows us to, have music that people in Australia or Guam or wherever can listen to. But, there's probably a band in Guam that deserves more attention from their local residents, and maybe it's harder for them, and that concerns me.
Yeah. Well, you talk about acting. You actually spent part of this year doing a one-man play, right?
I did. I've written this one-man true crime play, and it's the first time I've acted in 15 years. So it's been picked up, and I'm doing it all over the place for the next couple of years. So that's been a really cool thing for me, getting back to that.
Yeah, and I'm kind of tying that back into the record because of that feeling of loneliness and everything, and there you are as one person on a stage.
Yeah. Well, I have my man Julian Brown playing music behind me, and you have the audience, of course. I mean, I think that one of the things I love so much about being a performer is that if you really are a performer and it's deep inside you, the one place you never feel lonely is on stage, because you have 500 or 1,000 friends looking at you and involving themselves in your life and in your desire to be heard. And that's such an extraordinary thing, the generosity of an audience, this act of faith. You buy a ticket, you go in, and you believe. Church is, generally speaking, free, at least at first. And you can go there and have faith, and it doesn't cost you a thing. The theater, rock and roll, these things are asking you to invest in this act of faith. And I'm enormously in love with the audience, just as an idea that people collectively come together and stand in the dark and make it about somebody other than themselves for 2 hours is a huge act of generosity. So that is always, like, I never finish a show feeling depressed about humanity. I always feel kind of hopeful, because I think, well, if we can all stand together and do this for 2 hours, surely this has to spread. Surely we can do this in other contexts as well.
Yeah. Well, I have loved being one of those people in that dark room watching what you guys do on that stage, too.
I appreciate that, brother.
Just so good every time. Beyond that, I also read you're scoring for Angels in America, or you did already, or...
Yeah, I wrote the music and did the sound design for both parts of Angels in America out in Vancouver with a wonderful director called Kim Collier, and that was probably the biggest challenge of my life in a way. I mean, it's 7 hours when you count it all in. It's 7 hours of extraordinary drama, angels appearing through the ceiling and worlds blowing up, and it is an epic Hollywood movie on stage, and but such an unbelievably important play. I really urge anyone who hasn't read or seen that. There's a great film version of it. Because a lot of the play is about Roy Cohn, who was a lawyer in the 80s, who was on the Joseph McCarthy panel and was McCarthy's lawyer, and then became, drumroll please, Donald Trump's lawyer and his mentor. And, if you read interviews with Trump, he talks about Cohn as being the person who taught him how to be in public life. And Roy Cohn was, without any question, the most evil son of a bitch that has ever lived, with maybe one or two exceptions. But he died of AIDS, denying that he was a gay man, and in fact working ferociously to deny other gay people their rights, and denying that he had AIDS altogether. And that denial, that willingness to stick to the lie, that kind of vicious view of the world, really came from Roy Cohn. So that play, although it's 25 years old now, could not be more timely. It's something that everybody should check out. It's a really beautiful piece of art. Tony Kushner, man, is just, and if I'm not mistaken, I think maybe one of the initial productions of that show was in Louisville.
Yeah, we have a lot of that. The Actors Theater
of Louisville.
Yep, that's what
yeah,
happens,
Kushner has worked a lot in Louisville. That's an amazing theater out there that you guys have. So anyway, yeah, it was an incredible experience. Big challenge for me.
Yeah, what a great way to stretch so many different creative muscles all at once. I mean,
yeah, I've been lucky. I've been really lucky. And that, as I get older, I feel like that's really important. No matter what you do, no matter what your job is, resist that shrinking of your world, right?
Right.
I really admire my folks, as they got older, they didn't let their worlds shrink, and I learned a lot from watching them. I think it keeps you young to keep on saying yes to things you have no idea how to do. Because turns out you might be able to do it anyway.
Right. That's a great motto. Torque, thanks so much. I love talking to you.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I love this
Thank
record.
you so much. It's a pleasure, man. Thank you for exposing the record to people.
Yeah, thank you so much for making it. And we'll see you around.
Hopefully we'll see you in Louisville soon.
Sounds good.
Take it easy.
You too. Bye.
Bye.